Everyone, today we're going to talk about graphing basic sine and cosine. So the first thing I want you to do is take out your calculator if you have it. Please make sure that in the mode you're in degree mode just for this this activity right now. So what I want you to do is we're going to find the sine of 0, the sine of 45, the sine of 90, the sine of 135, and so on, all the way to the sine of 360. And then we're going to do the same for cosine. So I'll do the first couple ones with you. When I type in sine of 0, I get 0. So let's fill that in our chart. Okay. When I type in sine of 45, I get 0.71. Again, make sure you're in degree mode if you're not getting this number. When I type in sine of 90, I get 1. So I'll fill that in. So what I'd like you to do right now is finish the rest of these. Pause the video, finish the rest, and then come back. Okay, so here are all my completed in sine and cosines. I did the sine of 0, 45, 90, 135, all the way, and I did cosine of all those numbers too. So what I want to do is I want to start making a basic sine curve. So I already plotted the dots, but I'd like you to do it now. So sine of 0 is 0, sine of 45, 0.71, sine of 90, 1, sine of 135, 0.71, sine of 180, 0, sine of 225, negative 0.71, sine of 270, negative 1, sine of 315, negative 0.71, and sine of 360 is 0. So then I'd like you to connect them as best you can. It should not be straight. It should be a curve. I did the best I could with my mouse, so that's what it should sort of look like. Hopefully yours is a little neater than mine. And then let's do the same for cosine. So we'll plot cosine of 0 is 1, cosine of 45, 0.71, cosine of 90, 0, cosine 135, negative 0.71, cosine of 180, negative 1, cosine 225, negative 0.71, cosine 270, 0, cosine 315, 0.71, and cosine 360, 1. So this, when you connect them, this is what yours should look like. Again, I had to do it with my mouse, so it's a little shaky, but it should be curvy. Okay. So when we go to graph a basic sine curve, I already have mine graphed here, but I'll walk you through it. We basically graph 5 main points. So this one we graphed, I think, 9 points just to kind of really see what the curve looked like. But now that we know, we can make our lives easier when we graph, and we're going to graph 5 basic points. In this case, I went from 0 to 2 pi, and I put the degrees there just for you to see them this one time, although we tend to graph in radians. So we graph sine of 0, sine of 90, sine of 180, sine of 270, and sine of 360. So I graphed those points, and I connected them with a curve. So I'll do cosine with you right now. So cosine of 0 is 1, so we'll put our dot there. That's our first main dot. Cosine of pi over 2, or 90, is 0. Cosine of pi, or 180, is negative 1. Cosine of 270, 3 pi over 2, is back to 0. And then cosine of 2 pi, or 360, is at negative 1. So let's connect these. I'll try my best. Oops. Okay. Hopefully, again, yours looks a little better than mine, but that's the basic idea. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the basic graph and what some things mean. So we have general equation, a sine bx or a cosine bx. A is the number, the coefficient in front of the sine or cosine, and b is the coefficient or number in front of the x. The a value tells you your amplitude. A for amplitude. Your amplitude tells you how high or how low your graph will go. So in this case, This is a cosine graph, and the amplitude is 1 because the highest I go up is at 1. It gives you the range of the graph. So this range is -1 to 1. So I'll write that here just so you can kind of see it. -1 to 1. That's the range of this graph that we're looking at right now. The lowest y is -1. The highest y is 1. Okay. The frequency, or the number in front of the x, tells you the number of cycles, and we'll be talking about that more in the coming days, but this is one cycle of cosine. I just circled it so you could see it. That's those 5 main dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's one cycle, those 5 main dots. How many cycles you see from 0 to 2 pi. So here's one cycle. Here's my cosine graph. So this frequency is 1. I see one cycle from 0 to 2 pi. The frequency can change. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's half. And as we go on in the further days, we'll do practice with that. Okay, the period goes hand in hand with the frequency. The period tells you how long it takes to complete one cycle. So we know from 0 to 2 pi, that's the definition of frequency. In this graph, there's one cycle. The period is 2 pi. How long does it take to complete one cycle? Well, in this case, it takes 2 pi to complete one cycle. And there's a formula to find the period. Period is 2 pi over the frequency, or 2 pi over b. So let's just do a little bit of practice with finding amplitude, frequency, and period, and range. So here I have y equals 3 sine 2x. So remember, the amplitude is always the number in front of the sine or cosine. So in this case, my amplitude must be 3. The frequency is the number in front of the x. So this frequency is 2. That means I will see 2 cycles of sine. So I'll show you one cycle. This is one cycle of sine. So I'm going to see 2 of those from 0 to 2 pi. That's what the frequency means. The period, the formula is 2 pi over the frequency. So that means it's 2 pi over 2, or pi. I kind of hope that makes sense. If it takes up to 2 pi to see 2 cycles, then to see one cycle right here must just be at pi. And I know this is the first we're doing it. The more we'll do it, the easier this will become. And the range tells you your lowest y to your highest y. So my lowest y is -3, and my highest y is 3. So my range is -3 to 3. Okay, let's look at another one. Y equals cosine 4x. So the amplitude is the number in front of the cosine. So it's 1. The frequency is how many cycles of cosine I expect to see from 0 to 2 pi. Well, remember we talked about this is one cycle of cosine. So I'm going to see 4 of them from 0 to 2 pi in this example. Oh, that one wasn't so great. 4 cycles. I would expect to see 4 cycles of cosine. Okay. Period is formula 2 pi over the frequency. So it's going to be 2 pi over 4, or pi over 2. I'm going to see one cycle ending at pi over 2. So this would end at pi over 2. Then I'd have another pi over 2 that would bring me to pi. Then another pi over 2 that would bring me to 1.5 pi. And then another pi over 2 that would bring me here to 2 pi. And the range is your lowest y to your highest y. So your range is going to be -1 to 1. Okay. All right, so if you'd like, pause the video and try these next 2. Okay, so I'll go through these a little bit quicker. Amplitude is the number in front of the sine, so that's 1. Frequency is the number in front of the x, so that's 1. I will see one cycle from 0 to 2 pi. Period is 2 pi over the frequency, so 2 pi over 1 is 2 pi. And the range is going to be -1 to 1. Okay, and this one, the amplitude. So in this one, your amplitude is 2. There's a negative, and we'll talk about that in the coming days, but it means you have a reflection on your graph. But the amplitude is always going to be positive. So the highest we're going to go up is 2. The lowest we're going to go down is -2. That goes with the range, right? The frequency is 1/2, and the period is 2 pi over 1/2, which 2 pi divided by 1/2 is 4, so the period is 4 pi. And then this last one, your amplitude is 2. Your frequency, how many cycles do I see from 0 to 2 pi? Again, that's the definition of frequency. It always takes a little bit of getting used to, but we will. So if I look from 0 to 2 pi, I only see half of a cycle. So my frequency is 1/2, because when I look from 0 to 2 pi, that's what I need to do when I'm trying to find frequency, I only see half of a sine curve. And the period is how long it takes to complete one cycle. Well, one cycle of sine looks exactly like this. So this green that I'm highlighting right now is one cycle. Where did that one cycle end? Well, it ended at 4 pi. So the period is 4 pi. Okay. That's all for today. I'll talk to you soon.